How's it going, everyone? This is Jesse.
And this is Mustafa.
And you are listening to the 4th episode of The Bachelors.
God, I can't believe it's been 4 episodes. So what are we talking about today, Jesse?
Well, we have a couple different topics on the docket. We're going to be starting out with the budget that came out about an hour ago. So that's still fresh, and we'll be leading into a basic income discussion and finishing off with white nationalism on Reddit, everyone's favorite topic.
Oh, yeah. And that was the federal budget in Canada, for any clarification. And yeah, let's start on that budget, Jesse.
Yeah, so, obviously it covers an enormous amount of information, but we're going to be focusing on about 5 or 6 different topics that we thought were important for pretty much day-to-day life. The one that I would like to start off with is parental leave. So as you know, a good majority of the time, the woman is the one who takes most of the time off to raise the very early life of the child. A lot of that has to do with the fact that the woman has to take time off, whereas the man doesn't necessarily have to. And then that just extends into the whole time. I believe, as it is right now before this budget, it was 35 weeks, right, that they had the two parents?
Yeah.
Yeah, so combined, the two parents can take off 35 weeks. You can do any mix match of amount of time. And so what this new budget is doing is it's giving an incentive for the other parent to take time off as well.
Yeah, and obviously this is being like pretty heteronormative, but in that sense, it's like the father would have the option for 5 weeks of extra time, so that it doesn't have to cut into the other partner's time with the child. It's obviously a use it or lose it kind of system, so if they decide not to use it, that 35 weeks is applicable to the first partner.
Yeah.
And this benefit will also be applied to, will be offered to adoptive parents, same-sex parents. And honestly, it just seems like a really good change overall, right?
No, it does, yeah. And now it doesn't explicitly say that the 5-week use it or lose it is for the father, but in almost all cases, that's the case where it would be used as the father either not wanting to take time off or not thinking he should take time off. It will stay at 35 weeks unless the other parent who otherwise would not be taking time off does decide to take time off. They would get an extra 5 weeks. And so, that's good. The budget, in terms of the actual budgeting, it's $1.2 billion over 5 years that they're wanting to create the program. I think it is good. There's really no reason that I can think of that people wouldn't want this. Sure, you could say that's a waste of money if that's what you believe.
I feel like $1.2 billion is not that much considering
in the scheme of things.
Yeah, it's 5 weeks. If anything, it's just 5 weeks of like extra childcare for $1.2 billion for all Canadians. That sounds like a pretty good deal.
And it'll be made available in 2019, assuming that it makes it that far and it's not cut out for some reason.
So we gotta have a kid by then, right, Jesse?
Oh, that's the plan.
How are we splitting the time?
I think I should continue working.
Oh, okay.
So I'll take the 5 weeks.
So the podcast is still gonna continue?
Yeah. Okay. It'll be you in...
I'll be collecting my maternity leave from the Bachelors.
Yes.
Nice. The next issue on the table for the budget itself is the increase of money going towards Indigenous issues. So there's going to be another $448 million spent over the 5 years to create Indigenous skills and employment training program. So it's going to be replacing the Aboriginal skills and employment training strategy. So it's kind of just a different name, but also like a lot more money going into the program. So I feel like that's a pretty good spend of it. Use of money, regardless of where you are. It's just more money going into the Indigenous community for skills and training. It's also going to have the budget has also announced $1.4 billion over 6 years for First Nations Child and Family Services, just to kind of help deal with the disproportionate amount of Indigenous children who are still in foster care. It's pretty shocking how crazy those numbers are, right? And it's definitely still like one of the side effects of what we saw with like residential schools and like the 60s scoop and everything like that. Indigenous kids are still being targeted in foster care. So it's definitely good to see more money going towards that, $1.4 billion. definitely seems like a lot, but I feel like it will make a really good... What's the next thing on the federal budget?
Another thing that we thought was important, the small business tax reform. So essentially what this is it's incentivizing small businesses to have passive investments. And then the money that the income generated from those passive investments will be taxed at a lower threshold up until $150,000 of income. And I mean, this is one of those things where there's really no reason not to like this. It's not earth-shattering by any means, but it's giving us more money to put into investments, and it's less risky. We were talking about this a little bit before the podcast started. It's less risky than incentivizing private citizens from doing the same thing. So if you have companies that can take a hit if the investment goes wrong, then it's going to work out, right?
Yeah, and I think that's a bigger discussion to have, and I think I would like to hear about what other people think about that. Like, if you guys have any opinion about the incentive, what seems like an incentive now for investment for small businesses, please hit us up. You know what our email is, you know what my Twitter is. You can find Jesse on Facebook, if anything.
Yeah, I'm there somewhere, not exactly as big of a footprint as yours, but
hey, somewhere on the internet. And next is really the biggest thing coming out of the federal budget.
Well, speaking of big footprints, I mean, this is definitely the biggest one. So
it's a big one, yeah. So yesterday, in accordance to like when our taping is, we tape this on Tuesday when it goes out on Wednesday. So on Monday of this week, Eric Hoskins, who's the Minister of Health for Ontario, he resigned, and he announced that he was actually going to be leading an effort with the federal government to introduce pharmacare. So, turns out that was the day before the federal budget, of course. And today, the federal government announced that they will be doing some sort of national pharmacare strategy. It's not entirely clear how exactly that's going to turn out. Eric Hoskins is the one leading it, so he is going to be releasing, recommendations and doing consultations and so on. But what the Parliamentary Budget Office said was that $28.5 billion a year is spent in Canada on pharmaceuticals.
Yeah, it was a little odd wording wise. We're not sure if that's by private citizens or the federal government. I assume it's the federal government.
I think it's the entire spending, but I'm not 100% sure. Yeah, definitely. We're reading this from the Globe and Mail article on the federal budget, but it turns out that if the Parliamentary Budget Office saw that if the federal government was to do a national prescription program, it would only cost about $20 billion. And that would be because they're saving money by making separate arrangements with pharmaceutical companies and getting better rates for like bulk purchases and so on. So that's a really interesting thing to see. I know in Ontario we've seen the Liberal when government introduce OHIP Plus, which is beneficial for people 25 and under. But I think what the call was from the Liberal Party was not that this is the most we can do, but it's that we want to see the federal government step up to the plate and throw their hat in the game. So it's interesting. I think it also is really interesting from a constitutional aspect, right? Because we know that the provinces are responsible for healthcare, right? How would the federal government do this, right? Are they going to do it through a provincial buy-in strategy? Is every province going to buy in? Are provinces going to be willing because, we've dealt with federal government programs that get rolled back and then there's a dependency on it, right? Mm-hmm. It's like, obviously, I don't think the Justin Trudeau government is going to roll back on this promise in 3 years, but, when we have a government 20 years down the line and they're like, nah, we don't really think pharmacare is as important anymore. Are they going to roll that back? It makes that kind of weird arrangement when it's such a two-party kind of role. What do you think?
Especially taking into consideration, especially Ontario, they're already making steps in the same direction. Obviously, not to the same extent that the pharmacare program would, but people 25 and under are essentially getting everything for free. Are they going to say that we're already doing enough, or are they going to say we'll buy into your program but not to the extent that you want?
I think there's definitely going to be buy-in in Ontario, 100%.
Oh, for sure. I mean, Ontario would have to, but
yeah.
Are they going to try to negotiate, to a lesser extent than what the federal government wants, just because we are already doing?
And then what about like more like have-not provinces, right?
Yeah.
Like Manitoba or something, right? Are they going to want to buy in for pharmacare? Maybe because Manitoba is more left-leaning than other provinces, but I don't know if they're going to be interested in going in enough to make pharmacare worth it in Manitoba.
Exactly.
Right? So I don't know how this is going to fold out. It's going to be really interesting to see what Eric Hoskins is going to say and release as part of this national pharmacare plan. I am definitely going to be interested in that. I know it's definitely not the most like glittery thing that like the federal government can do, but it is definitely an interesting one to me.
Yeah, I mean,
who doesn't like free drugs, right?
Well, glittery isn't exactly a necessity. Just having it work is what matters.
For sure.
And the federal government lately has not exactly had a great track record with that. Point in case being the Phoenix pay system.
Oh boy.
So from what I understand, this is essentially just the federal government's payment program, right? I mean, it's how the public servants are paid. And there has been, and they recognize this, the federal government recognizes this, there's been plenty of issues with actually getting the deserved money to the deserving people. They've overpaid people, underpaid people for their work. People have been put on maternity leave for no reason. Like some random dude is put on maternity leave. I mean, it's failed up like tens of thousands of public servants over the time it's been issued. I mean, they're trying to phase it out. That's what the end goal is. But in the meantime, they have to have some sort of structure to continue paying their employees. I mean, even if it isn't working 100%, they have to try to fix it in the transition period. So, I mean, they're going to be investing almost $500 million over the next 6 years to deal with those ongoing issues to try to make it smoother and, I mean, actually function like it should. I'm not sure how exactly or how long it'll take to roll out a new program, one that hopefully works. But, I mean, if we're going to be just improving the current system over the next 6 years, I mean, I can't see a situation where that goes 100% smoothly, especially as taking into account how broken the program is now. I mean, it'll be rocky, but hopefully after 6 years or sooner, I mean, we'll get a better program.
And isn't it just great how the Stephen Harper government stuck us with a awful program that has lost so much money for the federal government? Just one more legacy of a great prime minister.
Not everyone needs to get paid. It's just whatever.
No, of course, public servants don't need to get paid. They're just doing the most important job in Canada.
They're public servants. They're doing what they need to do.
And on to the next, line item in the federal government budget is the money going towards journalism in Canada. Now, regardless of how much money they're giving, it's going to be around $50 million. Doesn't really matter. I think my entire point here is that I don't think we should be giving money to newspapers. And maybe there is an answer where some money can be given, and I just don't know, because I think it's a case of there's more negative results that you're going to get from bailing out newspapers and such. That,
like what? Give us a couple of answers.
So let's say the Toronto Star, right?
Yeah.
The Toronto Star is begging for money right now from the federal government. They have been for the last little while, because they've been bleeding money away in all these stupid projects like their iPad app, which lost them $40 million. Right? Think about that. They're doing all this. They're bleeding money out on stupid projects, and then they're saying, we need the government to bail us out because obviously journalism is important to a democracy, right?
Yeah.
Journalism is integral to a democracy, but when
the Toronto Star isn't.
The Toronto Star is I think it's the third largest newspaper in Canada,
sure.
Right? So it is huge, right? Tor Star is a huge newspaper brand. But it's like, when you say when this news executive is coming out and publishing stories in his newspaper, telling his writers to go and write and say, we need money, otherwise we're losing our jobs in journalism and we can't report the facts in Ontario.
Yeah, like, I mean, that's really like pretentious of the Toronto Star acting like they're the ones who preach the truth and the other ones aren't. I mean, at some point you just have to be taken accountable of making a bad business decision. If you made a bunch of these programs, this app, and it failed horribly. Like, I mean, I feel for the people, like, you know, the little guy working at the Toronto Star who's going to lose his job potentially. But I mean, you can't just act with impunity and say, like, no, we're the bringers of truth. I mean,
and that's exactly what I'm saying, right? When you say we need a government bailout, then you're saying that, like, okay, yeah, sure, the Toronto Star is going to get a bailout, but is, like, I don't know, Belleville, Ontario, their newspaper going to get a bailout? Yeah. I don't think so, right? Like, there's so many local newspapers in Canada which are closing down every single day or being bought out and their employees being fired because Toronto Star thinks that they're not profitable anymore. And meanwhile, you're going to be like, the Toronto Star just closed like 50 newspapers in Canada. We're going to go bail them out because they're the ones bringing truth. No, they're one of the biggest proponents of destroying fair journalism in Canada.
Yeah, I mean, I think that money should instead go to the little people trying to create their own, like, media outlet, like the Bachelors, you know? Like,
yeah, just fund the Bachelors with $50 million. The federal government.
How much we could do with $50 million? We could get buy 2 mics.
We could, 2 mics, and maybe buy a little bit different intro music. Think about that.
Less creaky chairs. That'll be great.
Less creaky chairs, and stop filming in my bedroom.
All right, so speaking of being able to run a smoother operation here at the Bachelors, one thing that could potentially help us do that is if the basic income program in Lindsay, Ontario, were to be put as a federal program and reaching from coast to coast. Then we would have a safety net, a basic income to work off of. And I mean, it would be supplementing any any income you get from working your own job up to a certain point. And in the Lindsay program, I believe it was $1,400 and no strings attached money per month. It wasn't the smoothest program in the world, but we hopefully will get more insights into whether or not it works. I believe it's either approaching or just past its first year in being in Lindsay, and we will see. It's supposed to run for another 2 years, and I guess at the end of the 3-year period, we will know whether or not we can extend it to a larger audience or if it needs to be brought back and worked on some more.
Basic income, my one true love. And I very much relate with that because I don't totally agree with it. I think it's one of the best little like pilot projects that the Wynne government has instituted. It only costs $50 million, and it's a great pilot project to test on this great idea. I think that it will, in the end, you know, it would be expensive if you made it across Ontario. I'm not going to deny that.
Well, I mean, expensive. I mean, it was a pilot project for 2,000 people in a small community, and it costs $50 million.
Well,
what's going to happen?
2,000 people is not all of the people that they want signed up. That's only the amount that they have right now.
Well, of course.
It's definitely like $50 million, and they haven't reached even close to all of that so far. But I'm just saying, like, in the sense of where is this money going to go? A lot of that money is going to be made into tax, right? Tax revenue will come up because those people will be spending money. You find what our research has shown. Research has shown that those people are going to be more cautious spending their money. And let's be real, like if you and I were to get $1,400 a month, yeah, that might make me less inclined to be at the mall looking for some shit job, but I would feel more able to go look for a job that I really cared about, right? Like if I wanted to become a freaking cowboy or something like that, and I wanted to like start working at a ranch, and that was my dream job, but it was just really hard to get. It would give me more time to be able to get that dream job, right? Like I think in the end of it, it's saving money, and it's worth the money, not because it's going to be an initially cheap project, but it's going to save money on like healthcare when somebody needs to go to the emergency room because they are having a panic attack because they're so stressed about money and they're so in debt. Or it's going to save money just because you're not going to have banks having to go after loans all the time from people who are deeply in debt because they couldn't afford their like rent bill, right? It's like those little things are going to make a difference to society as a whole, and I feel like it's totally worth the investment.
I mean, like, I agree with everything you said, just not to the extent that you're saying it will help. I mean, if people can't afford rent an extra $7,000 a year, well, I'm sure some people that might put them over the top and make them able to pay their rent, that's not going to be enough for a year's rent. I mean, I assume if they're on welfare in the first place, they're not making enough to meet a lot of the region's rent. An extra $7,000, I mean, it will help, but it's not going to suddenly cure, all the people's ability to pay rent.
And I don't think that's not the program's intended to do, right? That's not what basic income's saying. It's saying, here's what you need to be alive. Like, here's what you need to live. Now you have that. Now go find something that makes your life, like, worthwhile. Go find something that's, like, a good job. And, enjoy life as well. And I feel like that's something that if we believe the government should not enable people to have good lives, then I feel like that's one of the principles that I have of government, right? Government should be enabling people to have not only to be alive and not only to, like, fund healthcare or something, but I think government, if able, should be willing to make people's lives better.
Yeah, but you have to remember also that there's a very good chance that it won't be the government enabling the people to do this. It'll be other people paying through their taxes. I mean, there's two ways that could happen. Either one, the Canadian government goes into even more debt and they just pull this money out of their ass just to give to people in no strings attached money. And sure, you can say that they're going to be spending that money. Money will come back through taxes and whatnot. But I mean, that's not going to balance out by any means. The other option is,
what do you mean? Because like, where's that money going to go? How, like, if I am receiving $1,400, where is that money going to go except for going back into the economy and going back into taxes?
Yeah, but I mean,
it's totally an investment in your population.
But I mean, if the government gives out $100, they're not going to be receiving $100 back in taxes.
No, true. But if I get $100 and I go to the convenience store and spend $20, and I go to the Walmart and spend the other $80, that's $20 that's going to get taxed at the convenience store. $20 is $80 is going to get taxed at Walmart. But all of that money still goes into the economy.
Yes.
In general.
Okay. So using that example, if we use scenario one where the government is the one who's completely taking the hit for this, then that's all in while you're putting more money into the economy, but then the Canadian federal government is going into a deficit and Canada as a whole is going to owe more money. Or if you're saying that it's going to come directly out of people's taxes are going to go up to fund this, then I'm losing $1,400 that I could just as easily put back into the economy and giving it to this other person who, granted, might really need that $1,400. But if you're saying that the reason why this is justified is that they're going to be able to put it back into the economy, the person who's being taxed to give them that money could just as easily do that.
Oh,
now,
for sure.
100%, like, I agree, the moral issues for this, I'm all for. I mean, people shouldn't have to scrape by, every week trying to find scraps of food to eat just because they can't afford it. But at the same time, that's just a reality, unfortunately, of life in North America and Europe and a lot of these places.
I think you're completely misunderstanding how that would work, though, right? If you are out there making a $70,000 a year job and you would pay, say this entire program would cost you an extra $200 a year, which I don't even think it would even cost that, right? The amount of people on unemployment insurance in Canada is not that high. It is a very low number. I don't have that number right in front of me right now, so I'm not going to say that number. But we're not talking about like 50% of the population. You're not paying $14,000 extra a year. Sorry, $1,400 a month extra because you need to pay $1,400 a month to somebody who is on welfare. That's not how it's going to work, right? It's still going to be a very small proportion of Canadians who are receiving that. And when you're saying here's that money to get lifted out of poverty into a situation where you can get a better job, that at that point you would have enough money that you wouldn't be getting that $1,400 a year, then that person's going to be funding that system again, right? I'm not saying I'm taking $1,400 a month away from the average person, from the average Canadian to pay for the system for unemployed people. That's not how it works now.
Obviously, I 100% realize it's not one for one. It's not like each individual person is paying an extra $1,400.
I mean, that is the analogy that you made.
I realize, no, I'm saying, okay, it is the analogy I use, but saying that $1,400 in general is going to be spent either way, so the fact that it's stimulating the economy, I feel like is not a very good
because
example
that is
use.
an example of a stimulus completely, because that person who's making $70,000 a year is going to sit with that money in savings because they don't need to spend that money to be able to live their life fruitfully.
I mean,
meanwhile, that person who's on welfare has to spend that money. People who make more money save more money. That is totally...
I mean, it's one of those things where morally I'm definitely for it, but until we know exactly who, how much, and for how long people are being taxed in order to fund this, and how many people are going to be serviced under this program. I mean, obviously, we need to know that before any concrete yes or no's are given.
And that's the point of a $50 million pilot project, right?
No,
that is
of course,
a very small amount of money.
But again, I'm just like, the one issue I do have with that is with a program like this, especially when I believe the Canadian government is taking the hit for this, they're not taxing people to fund this project.
Well, it's the Ontario government right now. But
Excuse me, yes. I mean, it's just, I feel like in smaller samples like this, especially when, or if it's not being funded in the way that it will be if it goes to a larger audience, and if it is, then I feel like that has an issue in of itself. It's just, it's not going to be very accurate in whether or not it's manageable.
I would definitely disagree with that. I think the pilot project as it is can be very, very much scaled up theoretically, right? And just saying like, this is how many people we're doing it with right now. This is how many people we expect to do it with, because we have the numbers for how many people collect Ontario Works right now, and saying that if that's the system that's there and this is the system we want to put in, this is how much we're going to pay out. I think that's a done deal. That's pretty easy to figure out. But anyways.
Well, we'll see. I mean, if the pilot project continues to stay as successful as it apparently is, then it'll keep going. And at the end of the 3-year period, we will definitely have a better outlook on to whether or not this is something we can further and expand. But until then, I guess we're just going to have to wait with bated breath and see.
Yep, and I feel like it's worth saying that no matter what the pilot project says, I'm definitely going to be in support of it. Because even if it's not applied in Ontario now, I think that there is going to be a time and a place where it's necessary, and it is something that we should move forward with as a society. So, the next topic we're going to talk about is an old friend. Back in the day, I used to be a very frequent user of Reddit. In my time in Reddit, I learned a lot, saw a lot, and decided to get the fuck off Reddit, because I realized that it was not exactly the best place on the internet. Last week, or this week, or sometime in the last couple days, Canadaland, which is a show I very much admire, is a news outlet that I very much admire, and Jesse Hawken released an episode criticizing a lot of things that happen on Reddit. If you are not familiar, Reddit is split up into subreddits, and a subreddit that is recommended to all Canadians when they register a new account is r/Canada. r/Canada is generally where Canadians, or people who are at least interested in Canada, would post things about Canada, news articles, ask me anything, just random posts, whatever they want.
I feel like it's worth mentioning that a vast majority of the content on r/Canada is explicitly political, though.
Definitely.
I mean, obviously there are.
It's news, right?
There are some things where it's like, oh, look at this rainbow type deal, but I mean, a very good majority is,
it's either political or politically consequential.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right. So, r/Canada has recently had a little bit of a scandal where one of the moderators has said that he or she is a white nationalist, is becoming a white nationalist, and this kind of ties into the entire theme of Reddit, where Reddit has very much, and a lot of corners of Reddit have skewed very much alt-right. Reddit is also attributed with a big rise of Donald Trump and a lot of other things, like it's tied with the whole Unite the Right rally and so on. Aside from that, Jesse is a very active Reddit user. I would think you would define yourself as?
Active, not necessarily. I mean, I'm on Reddit a lot, but I'm more of what they would call a lurker. I'm not exactly posting things. Okay. I'm just, I'm looking, I'm seeing, I'm reading. I am subscribed to r/Canada. Okay. Although, to be completely honest, I haven't been subscribed too long. It's just coincidentally I had found it a couple months ago and hadn't paid too much mind to it. So when I say that I haven't exactly seen much white nationalism on that subreddit, take that with a grain of salt, just because I am extremely new to that subreddit and I am not focusing very much on it. But I mean, I have been looking through there, I say once a day, not very thoroughly, but clicking on a link here and there, and I think, as most people on Reddit would agree, the real fun is reading through the comments. And so that's what I spend a majority of my time doing. And I haven't exactly seen a whole lot of white nationalism. Maybe it's too subtle for me to decipher, but, for what it's worth, I have not exactly seen this uprising.
Okay. From my opinion, I've definitely very much seen a very conservative tint to r/Canada. And when I say very conservative, I'm talking like conspiracies or like alt-right racist conspiracies and stuff like that. There was a post a little while ago that I saw linked on Twitter, and it was about it's okay to be white flyers at U of T, and how some clubs at U of T are getting extra funding because of racism on campus, and how the Ontario government and the federal government have announced more money for anti-racism projects and stuff. And a lot of the comments were very much like saying that this is a conspiracy, that people have made up these kind of attacks because they want more money put into anti-racism projects, because they're just trying to make money, blaming like people like that girl who made up the attack about the hijab cutting incident.
Yeah.
It was a weird incident, but in the end of the day, it's a 10-year-old girl. And making conspiracies about how this is all just a big plot for people of color to make money. So I definitely see what this whole thing is talking about. And I'm on r/Canada right now, and it's like, when I look at this front page, it's not Canada's biggest news, right? It's like, the social justice revolution has taken over law schools, or upcoming Jordan Peterson event stirs backlash at Queen's University. Like, let's be real. r/Canada has a alt-right tinge. And it says a lot that some of the moderators are alt-right and coming out as white nationalists, when moderators have so much power. On that same post that I saw those comments about conspiracy theories about racism in Toronto and Ontario and in Canada in general, all of the people that were like, I don't know if that's legit, like, that seems a little far-fetched, are being shouted down because they're seen as social justice warriors or this or that, just because these conspiracies that are being made in the comments of Reddit are definitely like gospel. I don't know, Jesse, what do you think?
All right, so let me ask you a question. You've established what is going on in r/Canada. There's an alt-right tinge to it. The moderators are apparently alt-right. Although in the Canada Land podcast, it was stated that there was context that made the comment by the moderator, and the moderator said, "I'm paraphrasing here. He says, I'm not a white nationalist, but I'm becoming one, or I'm starting to become one."
I think that's saying you're a white nationalist.
Well, sure, yeah. I mean, it's okay. Let's just assume yes, he and I believe there's two other moderators are 100% white nationalists. Let me ask you the question: are Canada's tinged with alt-right leanings? The moderators are white nationalists. What is the problem?
The problem is that r/Canada represents Canada.
Okay, hold on. Why does it represent Canada?
First off, when Reddit users create an account and it says they're from and Reddit recognizes they're from Canada, it recommends that you subscribe to r/Canada. It also has 340,000 subscribers. As I'm looking at this page at the moment, 2,800 people are looking at this list of things that are happening in Canada on r/Canada.
Okay.
And it also, Jesse Hawken looked at in the Canada Land podcast how it determines so much of what is going to happen in SEO on Google. Like, when you search Canadian news, Reddit Reddit is substantial in what appears near the top, right? It makes an impact on the internet at large. What happens in r/Canada does not happen in a vacuum, especially when it has almost 400,000 people subscribed to it. So here's why does it not matter, Jesse?
I feel like out of everything you just said, the only issue is that Reddit is promoting this subreddit. Now, I don't know if they, Reddit, meaning the people running Reddit, know exactly what the specific content in Canada is. I'm sure they do very broad screenings just to make sure there's nothing illegal, nothing explicitly
bad,
hate speech, that sort of thing. But I doubt that there's someone combing through every single post. That's what the moderators are for. That's the whole reason moderators are there. And so, I feel like there could be an issue, or it could just be a case of the subreddit is called Canada, and that's why that if you have an IP coming from Canada, it's being promoted to you. So I can see that how that's an issue where if this is obviously turning into one political or being dominated by one ideology compared to another, then maybe Reddit shouldn't promote it. But like you said yourself, there's 300,000 people subscribed here, 340,814 Canadians to be exact. It says Canadians, we don't know where they're from, but I assume a majority of them are from Canada. There's 300,000 people subscribed here. If they didn't like it, if they thought that this was just, so far gone, Canada, the Canadian subreddit is just a bunch of alt-right, then either they would disagree and leave, they would agree, stay, and combat it, which we see in some of the comments, or, it's not as bad as we're led to believe. And yes, the moderators, let's operate under the assumption that the moderators are 100% white nationalist. This is their thread. I mean, that's how Reddit works, is anyone can create a subreddit. I can create a subreddit, make myself the moderator, and say, if anything you say is not in line with alt-right ideology, you will be banned. And that will 100% work. I mean, I'm sure there's certain rules Reddit has where that might not necessarily be as straightforward, but that's essentially what it is. I mean, each subreddit has its own rules that you can be banned for certain reasons. I mean, I looked into promoting something of my own on a couple subreddits, and it was very explicitly stated that you cannot do that or you'd be banned. So I honestly don't think that this is an issue until we get to a point where, people are organizing, rallies to lynch people if there's hate speech, stuff like that. Obviously, that's illegal.
I mean,
it's
there's definitely a lot of alt-right rallies that happen in Canada, but
what's you can argue all day that alt-right ideology is wrong, is immoral, whatnot, but until it's illegal, there's nothing wrong with having a subreddit that's alt-right.
I mean, law is a moral document. So everything which is legal or illegal is either moral or immoral, that's how it's all.
Yeah, but not everything immoral is illegal.
No, it's true.
And not everything that is immoral should be illegal, and there's a very, very important boundary to be made between morals and legality.
I think that's an irrelevant discussion in this.
I think it's explicitly important to bring that up if you're saying that there's an issue with our Canada being alt-right.
Regardless, I think that the problem with our Canada being alt-right, like it seems to be, is not whether it's because when you say, okay, I just created a Reddit account and it says that I'm in Canada, that this is representative of me. This is you saying, I'm Canadian, I belong in the subreddit. Okay, sure. Oh shit, all of these people that are Canadian, all these Canadians that they paired me with are all thinking that Justin Trudeau's an idiot because he dressed up in Indian clothes while he was in India, which is an irrelevant discussion at all. But because they're all mad about it and they're representative of Canada and I want to be part of the Reddit community, maybe I'm a little less combative. And, it being part of the search results and being preference because Reddit is such a big community is a big deal. That is literally how Donald Trump came to power, because of, obscure methods of SEO and bringing controversial viewpoints to the front of Twitter or YouTube or Reddit. Those are the kind of things that completely alter democracy.
Yeah, I mean, and altering democracy is in no way a bad thing unless you're doing something. I mean, I honestly don't see the issue with this. I mean, if someone is going to be, and I understand very well that the media impacts people in profound ways, but if you as someone are going to hop on Reddit, create a new account, see one single subreddit that is alt-right leaning and immediately change your way of thinking to be in line with this, then there's a much bigger issue than our Canada. That issue is with that person being so gullible and so influential. There is how many different subreddits dedicated to Canada, and yes, this might be the biggest one, but you can find people that are socialist in one Reddit, conservative in the other, alt-right in this one, maybe liberal in another. You can find people who I'm sure have no idea what they're talking about. They don't care about politics. They just want to show off the beauty of Canada. You can show up to that one and say, wow, Canada is just beautiful, and be done with it. I honestly don't see the issue with this. There are arguments to be made that, yes, Reddit is promoting this one, and maybe that is the only issue I can see. But if you're just talking about people are being influenced by it, then yes, people are being influenced by things all day and night. I mean, just
okay,
because
yeah. So sure, people are on that subreddit are conservative. Okay, I have no issue with conservative in general. But when you have somebody that says, I am becoming a white nationalist, slowly becoming a white nationalist, that is the point where you say, okay, that's when we ban that person. Like, I don't see any tolerance for someone saying, I'm slowly becoming a white nationalist, and also being responsible for the largest page in Canada.
There's no reason that Redditors who don't agree with something have to subscribe to something. And that's why I'm saying the only issue with this is that Reddit itself is promoting this subreddit. If there are subreddits dedicated to all sorts of immoral things, I just won't go on them, or if I do go on them, it's to, try to put my word in, change someone's mind, something like that.
But
that's the whole purpose.
Have an issue if Reddit had pages that were illegal.
Well, I mean, if it's illegal, that's another story, because it's illegal. I mean, we've established, for whatever reason, that you cannot do that until it's established that you cannot be alt-right.
But Reddit exists on the internet,
yes,
where something might be illegal one place and not the other.
Okay.
Right? Is it wrong for Reddit to have something that's illegal? Right? If Reddit has a subreddit on smoking marijuana.
Mm-hmm.
It's illegal in a lot of places.
Okay.
Is that okay to have on Reddit?
I don't see any reason.
Don't see any reason to have it on Reddit?
Well, I mean, it depends on what the subreddit is. If I have a subreddit dedicated to murder, and it's...
But murder is very... You're taking it very, very extreme.
No. You
said laws are where we draw the boundary, and I'm saying a law, and you're saying, and now you want to go to murder. Like, is that right or wrong?
Let me finish. If I have a subreddit on murder, which is... Anywhere you go, murder is just extremely bad. You'll be put in jail forever. Murder is just a no-go. That doesn't necessarily mean I'm promoting murder. If I have r/murder, I'm talking about this person was murdered, that person was murdered, different murder trials.
Sure,
the development of murder. It doesn't necessarily mean I am promoting murder. If I have a subreddit dedicated to alt-right, it doesn't necessarily mean that I'm promoting violence, I'm promoting hatred.
That's completely different. No, because you're saying one of them is saying these are crimes that happened, and the other one is an alt-right discussion board where you're saying, guys, I really agree with it's okay to be white. I really agree with this white nationalist. I really agree. I'm kind of thinking about joining the KKK. That's very different than saying there's a serial killer in London or Toronto or something like that. Totally different. I mean, if the murder subreddit was people saying, I'm planning on shooting up my school, that is equivalent. Sure, that's equivalent to it. But it's totally different. If I made a subreddit and it was only stories of people who were white nationalists getting arrested or something like that, then sure, I think that's totally applicable. You're just giving unbiased news, right? It's just saying,
yeah, but
here's something.
That's the thing. It's applicable because it's dependent on what the content of the subreddit is. Just because something is based around something that's illegal or based around something that a majority of people don't agree with doesn't mean that it should be banned, doesn't mean that it shouldn't exist. I mean, I
think it should. You're being privy to those violent ideas, and by having a website that enables people to access to those ideas, you are enabling that.
Yeah, but from what I can tell, the issue with r/Canada is, one, that there's an alt-right leaning, which I feel is ludicrous to think that that's a problem in the scheme of things, and B, is that the moderator, who rightly so can ban whatever, can delete comments, can
spotlight other things.
Yes,
yeah, for sure. Yeah. He has full control over the biggest
so saying
subreddit.
He's a white nationalist. I mean, obviously, I understand that even if he tries to remain unbiased, which apparently he's not trying to anyway, that certain implicit biases are going to come through in the things he bans and does not ban. But unless he is saying, let's go commit violent acts, let's go do this, it doesn't matter. What's the issue?
If one of the r/Canada moderators says, okay, I am sympathetic of Al-Qaeda, and I think that I'm pretty much an Islamic extremist, would you be okay with that person being a moderator of what is the largest subreddit that represents Canada?
I mean, I would hope that he wouldn't be the moderator, but what we can do is unsubscribe, and then that issue goes away. So there's 340,000 people subscribed to this. If they had an issue, they would unsubscribe. Now, apparently, the alt-right leaning has come about in fairly recently. I don't know what the timeline is. So, sure, that could explain... I would
argue that Reddit's had an alt-right leaning for many years, but to go...
Well, I just mean for the specific subreddit. And, I mean, I'm taking that off of secondhand accounts, but I'll take that to be true. I mean, I'm sure... I don't know why they would make that up. And that could explain the fact that it's only recently that the alt-right leaning has come about. That could explain why there's still so many subscribers. But you have two scenarios. Either 340,000 people are subscribed to this and don't care or are just going back and forth with the white nationalist views, or there's 340,000 white nationalists. I mean, those are your two options. And now, if there's 340,000 white nationalists, cool. As long as they don't start a riot and start killing people, there's no issue with it. In my mind, I honestly think this is a non-issue, past the point where you could say Reddit is promoting an explicitly leaning one way or the other subreddit. I would make the argument that Reddit is promoting a group which is like very able to assimilate people into an alt-right narrative. I mean, sure, they're very able to assimilate, but I mean, if this is... Okay, so you don't believe that there is a very left-leaning subreddit that's easily assimilating people?
I don't believe that there is a left-leaning subreddit that represents Canada that Reddit is suggesting to me when I create an account on Reddit. No.
Okay, so the one thing we agree with, let's just get that out. The one thing we agree with is Reddit should not be promoting r/Canada.
Yes, but then I think they should go further as well. Because now they have to make reparations for recommending 340,000 people. You say, okay, this is r/Canada. I'm going to stop recommending it to people. I'm going to promote this other one that is more fair. And then you make sure that this white nationalist guy is banned because he manipulated
Why should he be banned?
Because he manipulated a
group.
He
manipulated his own group that he created?
He didn't necessarily create it, but
he's the moderator, so for all intents and purposes, this is his subreddit. He can do with it what he wants.
I think white nationalists should be banned from Reddit.
No, okay, let me make something also clear. I'm not a white nationalist. I'm not supporting...
But you are white, so yes, that is part of it.
Why would that be...
That's definitely relevant to a discussion, yes.
Why? Because I'm more likely to be white nationalist because I'm white?
I mean, I don't know any white nationalists who aren't white.
Okay, but I mean, that doesn't...
I think it's still relevant to the discussion.
Okay, sure.
Yeah.
But I'm not a white nationalist. I do not think white nationalism is by any means a positive ideology. I don't think it should be adopted. But at the same time, it is an ideology, and unless they are doing things explicitly illegal, explicitly violent, hate speech, whatnot, which, granted, does happen a lot.
Yeah.
But just because someone is a supporter of white nationalism, to me, does not mean that they cannot have a voice. That's essentially what I'm saying. And if this subreddit is supporting white nationalism, then so be it. Don't subscribe to it. I mean, hopefully people are aware very quickly that it does have this leaning, and they don't subscribe to it. But I mean, if people are assimilated, then that's what they believe. I mean, that's if they're so easily convinced, then I assume they internally had some of these thoughts to begin with, or that they're just of the mind that these things are right, and eventually they would have leaned that way anyway. I mean, there's definitely, it's not like there's only one source on Reddit. It's not like Our Canada is the only Canadian subreddit. And yes, again, we come back to the fact that it's being promoted, but there's many, many, many different subreddits with many, many, many different leanings. And you can peruse them and subscribe to the ones that you like, and you don't have to stay with the one, right?
I'm just going to stay off Reddit. I feel like that's better for my...
Hey guys, so the audio got messed up, and Jesse's ending and did not work out as well, but that is the end of the episode. We don't have any quick notes this week because the episode is already so long. We'll be back with quick notes next week and with other stories that hopefully don't involve white nationalism. See you then.
That wraps up our episode for the day. Thank you all for listening. My name is Mustafa Kamisa.
And my name is Jesse Hodson. We hope you enjoyed our discussion, and now we want to hear from you.
You can hit us up on email, thebachelorspod@gmail.com, or find me on Twitter at MooseKamisa.
An episode comes out every Wednesday at 5 a.m., just in time for your commute.
Tune in then.